Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story, over $8 billion earmarked for Intel from the Biden administration. The goal is to boost American chip making. More on how the U.S.-China chip war is heating up as November 5th looms. A New York-based performing arts company facing suppression on home soil. A new report says the New York Times is targeting the group on top of continued pressure from the Chinese Communist Party. We speak to the report's author for a breakdown. The EU chamber in China sending a warning to Beijing, addressing the risks to foreign companies operating there or risk having even more companies flee. And under the shadow of Beijing's influence, Pacific nations seek out a new partner alongside the U.S., Japan. More on Tokyo's message about defense ties in the region. As the election heats up, President Biden doubles down on chip wars with China, the administration announcing $20 billion in grants and loans to America's largest chipmaker, Intel. Here's a clip of President Biden breaking the news in Arizona Wednesday.
Today's investment helps all Americans in red states and blue states, all across America. If we invent it in America, it should be made in America.
The over $8 billion would mark the single biggest grant to any chip company under the CHIPS and Science Act. On top of that money, Intel would also get $11 billion in loans. All of this money would help the tech giant expand facilities in 4 states, Arizona, Ohio, New Mexico, and Oregon, so that it can make better and more chips for U.S. buyers. In return, Intel is expected to invest $100 billion in chip production and create tens of thousands of jobs. This announcement comes as Biden tries to court voters in Arizona, one of a few hotly contested swing states in the 2024 election. It's part of his 3-state tour to promote his signature policies, infrastructure, chips, and green energy. Semiconductors are at the heart of the U.S.-China competition. Chips power all modern technology, from cars to iPhones. They're also essential for military capabilities, acting as the brains of nuclear arms and missiles. Global superpowers need the most advanced chips to get an edge in future wars. The U.S.-China chip race is a complex one. America leads the world in chip design, but relies on a Taiwanese chip maker to produce its most advanced chips. At the same time, Taiwan is under the shadow of a potential Chinese invasion because the Chinese Communist Party sees the island as its own territory despite never having ruled it. China lags behind the U.S. in terms of chip technology, and the Chinese military has been relying on advanced American AI chips to advance its own technology. The U.S. has come out with bans limiting China's access to American chips, but China remains a crucial market for top American chip makers. For example, over a quarter of Intel's revenue comes from China. Back to the $8 billion grant, Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo said the goal is to help America produce 20% of the world's cutting-edge chips by the end of the decade. GlobalFoundries, a chipmaker based in upstate New York, received over $1 billion in grant money. Foreign chipmakers, including Taiwan's TSMC and Samsung, also applied for grants and are still waiting for award announcements. The New York Times has for nearly 6 months been preparing a hit piece against Shenyang Performing Arts. That's what NTD's sister media, the Epoch Times, has learned. New York-based Shenyang tours the globe with 8 companies performing simultaneously. Its mission: to revive traditional Chinese culture through the medium of dance and music. It also shines a light on human rights abuses happening in today's China under the communist regime. Because of it, the company cannot perform inside China. What's behind the Epoch Times' investigation, and why did the New York Times decide to target Shenyang? Epoch Times investigative reporter Peter Schwab and Crossroads' host Joshua Phillip join us to discuss. Peter, you just released a report called "The New York Times, After Years of Appeasing the CCP, Now Plans Attack on Shenyang." Now, this is like the biggest media in America, the New York Times. Many people look up to this. What did you find out here? How do we know this is a hit piece that they're planning on Shenyang?
Well, the company found out about half a year ago that 2 reporters from the New York Times were reaching out to former artists with Shenyun. And they were asking some questions that kind of led the company to believe that they're trying to specifically find people who may have left the company with a grudge, and that they're specifically looking for negative information. And then gradually they kind of more information came to them from former members of the company, and they got more specifics of what it's kind of shaping up to be. So yeah, it looked like there was definitely an intent to gather negative information. It looked like they were trying to exclude, or they were planning to exclude positive information they would receive.
You point out some specific questions these dancers were being asked. Give us an example of that. How did we know this was going to be a negative piece?
I think one specific person had a very kind of, yeah, she was a bit disturbed by what the reporters were asking her. They basically reached out to her to ask specifically about a dance injury she had during a performance years ago. And they kind of suggested in the email that part of the story would try to make it look like that the dancers are not receiving proper medical care when they get injured during practice or, performing on stage. And she was a bit upset about that, because that was not her experience. And so we reached out to other people, former dancers, current dancers, students at 2 schools that are affiliated with Shenyun. It turned out they have a quite rigorous kind of monitoring of the physical fitness of the dancers, that specifically to make sure that they're really in top shape. So it really seemed like it's exactly the opposite of what the reporters were trying to insinuate.
Yeah, and on that too, I mean, I know Peter was looking into this. If you look at the stats based on normal injuries in ballet, for example, it looks like it's significantly lower with Shenyun. Like, people get injured less, actually. Frankly, the facts and even documented cases of dancers getting injured there and then getting, of course, proper treatment also goes just right in the face of what New York Times seems to be trying to cobble together. And I think that's where, he started looking into, of course, the China ties and such. And, because that's the big concern, is fine, media wanting to do a biased article. That's one thing. It's another thing if that biased article is aligning with, say, foreign government, like disinformation, like real, not the name-calling type, but actual, like from the Chinese Communist Party, being used for what's really a genocide in China. The question is, why are they doing it, I think.
Peter, speaking of this, Shenyun is a performing arts company, right? Why target Shenyun? What's the significance here?
It's a company that showcases traditional Chinese culture. So they're presenting a very different view of what Chinese culture is. Basically focusing on kind of the essence of the traditional culture, more kind of the spiritual underpinning of it. They're presenting something that this is what China could look like. This is the kind of the authentic culture that is distinct from kind of the culture tainted by the imported communist ideology.
On that note, Peter, what are the New York Times' vested interests in China? Why are they doing this? Is it money? What is it?
They've been very eager to expand their presence there, their reporting team to recruit local reporters, Chinese reporters, to kind of penetrate the Chinese market, to somehow get their product there. I think even a former executive editor of the New York Times, she came out in her book that saying that after they published an expose on the family wealth of former Chinese Premier Wen Jiabao, the CCP banned their website in China and expelled their reporters. And but the publisher of the paper was trying to kind of write an apologetic letter to the CCP, trying to kind of appease the regime again, try to like find a way to get back in. It really seems to be very important for them to have the China presence. They kind of pride themselves on being able to harness that, and it just inevitably gives the CCP a leverage to kind of play those bargaining chips.
Quite shocking indeed. Joshua Phillip, Peter Schwab, thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Watch the full interview this Saturday on TV at 11 a.m. Eastern Time or stream it on Epic TV. That's the epictimes.com/epictv. China is home to one of the world's biggest markets, so why are many foreign companies heading for the exit? Pointing to the business environment under the Chinese Communist Party, President of the European Chamber in China shed light on mounting challenges during a presentation in Beijing Wednesday.
Actually, last year we had the highest number on record indicating that politicization of the business environment was the biggest concern that they had. An even higher percentage this year, with 55% of our members indicating that they had seen an increase in the politicization of the business environment year on year.
China's market has become less predictable, reliable, and efficient. That's what the EU Chamber said in a warning to Beijing. In recent years, investors endured Beijing's draconian COVID-19 policies, which made it difficult to run businesses in China. Rising tensions between Washington and Beijing also put many international businesses in a tough position. And now they're facing a sluggish Chinese economy and low consumer confidence. Last year, foreign investment in China fell 8% compared to the year before. With the Chinese economy dragging its feet, competition for civil service jobs is more intense than ever. Over 5 million people took part in civil service exams across China last weekend, a 17% increase from a year ago. On average, 37 people apply for each civil service position, compared to the 32-to-1 ratio last year. But the admission rate is less than 3%. In some regions, over 2,000 people are competing for a single popular position. That's according to Chinese media reports. An expert told VOA that job seekers are turning to civil servant jobs because of China's reeling economy. The positions are known to be more stable with better working conditions. That's as foreign investment drops in the country. Private companies cut back on hiring and widespread layoffs continue. The expert noted that local authorities and their departments are working with tight budgets and are unlikely to bring on new hires. Japan is reinforcing security ties with nations in the Pacific amid growing Chinese influence. Tokyo hosted dialogue with 14 countries in the region Wednesday, affirming its commitment to strengthening defense ties with them.
Unfortunately, today in the world and in the Indo-Pacific region, unilateral changes to the status quo by force and coercion or such attempts to do so are increasing.
Defense officials from both countries discussed how to cooperate in dealing with foreign influence operations, as well as working together in the space and cyber fields. The meeting comes as China makes even more inroads into the region. Last month, news broke that Chinese police joined patrols in Kiribati, Hawaii's closest neighbor in the Pacific. And in 2022, Beijing signed a security pact with the Solomon Islands, another Pacific nation about 1,000 miles off the coast of Australia. It sparked concern among Western powers over the potential of a Chinese military base stationed near a vital U.S. ally. That's all for today's China in Focus on YouTube. We're now sharing a shortened version of our program here after being demonetized for 3 years. If you'd like to support us, consider donating. Find us at donorbox.org/China-in-focus or subscribe to our partner platform Epic TV, where you can watch our full episodes. Just click the link down below. Here's what to look out for in our second half. A new law in Hong Kong. Is the former British colony still safe for Western lawyers, businessmen, and experts? And where is the boundary between human rights and crime? And former President Donald Trump says he'll impose 100% tariffs on Chinese cars made in Mexico, plus even more penalties on all imported goods. How could the drastic move impact the U.S. economy and your wallet? Thanks for watching China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. See you tomorrow.